The howling wind of Croesus cut through the air like shattered glass. Empress Zara stood in the medical bay, blood trickling from a gash above her left golden eye, her burgundy scales shimmering even in the harsh white light. At 8 feet tall, she dominated the cramped space, her copper hair whipping around her face as she glared down at the examination table. Colonel Thaddeus Brennan, 58 years of hard living etched into his weathered face, sat restrained by glowing energy bonds. His gray hair was matted with sweat and ice, his piercing blue eyes watching the alien queen with an expression caught somewhere between exhaustion and dark amusement. Dr. Kira, her silver blue scales catching the light, adjusted the Zerathian medical scanner with practiced efficiency. Her voice carried the harmonics of her species, making the air vibrate. Your Majesty, for an accurate pelvic scan, you must assume the examination position. Zara's scales flashed crimson patterns of embarrassment and fury rippling across her towering form. A queen did not assume such undignified positions, particularly not in front of the human who had killed her brother. Brennan couldn't help himself. A laugh escaped, sharp and involuntary. Zara's head whipped toward him, golden eyes narrowing to vertical slits. You find this amusing, human? Your Majesty, Brennan said, his smile fading but not quite disappearing. I've been shot at, blown up, chased by ice monsters, and now I'm watching an alien queen get a prenatal exam. For my kid. Yeah, the situation's a little absurd. The plasma spear materialized in Zara's hand, its tip crackling with barely contained energy as it pressed against Brendan's throat. The smell of ozone filled the air. You dare mock your queen? Not mocking, Brennan replied, meeting her alien gaze without flinching. Just acknowledging that sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of humor. For a long moment, the only sound was the howl of the blizzard outside and the soft hum of medical equipment. Then Zara's scales shifted crimson, fading to that deep purple Brennan had come to recognize as something close to vulnerability. Something almost like a smile touched her angular features. You are impossibly irreverent, Colonel Brennan. It's a coping mechanism, Your Majesty. The scene dissolved into darkness, replaced by stark white text against the void. 84 hours earlier, the council chamber of the Zerathian homeworld rose 300 feet above the planet's surface, its walls grown from the same crystalline material that powered their civilization. Bioluminescent veins pulsed through the structure like a heartbeat, casting everything in shades of blue and green that no human eye had ever witnessed. Empress Zara stood before the High Council, her burgundy scales catching the light as she gestured to the holographic displays floating between her and the assembled elders. 2 star systems rotated slowly in the air, both marked with the same ominous red indicators. Our sun, she said, her voice carrying the subharmonics that made every Zerathian in the chamber feel her words in their bones, will expand in 800 years. Your children's children's children will watch their homeworld burn. She swept her hand to the second display. Their sun faces the same fate. In their timeline, 1,000 years. Both our species are dying counselors. Separately, we have no future. Together, we might build one. Elder Vorath, his scales dulled by centuries to pale gray, leaned forward on his crystalline seat. This hybrid research violates laws older than our recorded history, Empress. We do not mix our essence with alien creatures. Ancient law, Zara countered to him, her scales flashing defiant red, cannot save us from extinction. I ask you to choose, die pure and alone, or adapt and survive. General Vex rose from his position among the military advisors, his emerald scales bearing the ceremonial scars of a dozen campaigns. The loss of General Kren, his commander and Zara's brother, had left him the de facto leader of the hardline faction. Kren died fighting this madness, Vex said, his voice resonating with barely controlled fury. He understood that cooperation with humans means the death of everything we are. You dishonor his memory with every word, Empress. The chamber fell silent. The blood debt hung between them, unspoken, but felt by everyone present. Zara's brother killed by human orbital bombardment. The debt unpaid, the revenge not taken. To some, it made her look weak. To others, it made her a traitor. Zara's hand unconsciously touched the memorial crystal hanging at her throat, the last fragment of her brother's personal effects recovered from the Mars battlefield. Inside the crystal, his genetic code remained preserved, as was tradition, a constant reminder of what she had lost. My brother, she said quietly, but her voice still carried to every corner of the vast chamber, was fed lies by advisors who wanted war to continue. He died believing humans were preparing to exterminate us all. That lie cost 2,000 human civilians their lives, and it cost us Kren. She turned to face Vex directly, her height advantage meaningless, but her royal authority absolute. I will not repeat his mistakes. I will not let fear and hatred determine our future. The research continues. The vote was called. The margin was narrow, 3 votes, but it was enough. The hybrid research program would continue under increased scrutiny and with the understanding that any hint of weaponization would mean immediate termination. As the council dispersed, Zara remained alone in the chamber, staring at the holographic projections of dying suns. Her reflection rippled across the crystalline walls, a solitary figure bearing the weight of 2 species' futures. She had no way of knowing that in 84 hours she would be carrying proof more profound than any laboratory could produce. Snow fell soft and heavy on the Montana cabin, transforming the pine forest into a monochrome landscape of white and deeper white. Inside, Colonel Thaddeus Brennan sat in his favorite chair, a glass of whiskey untouched on the table beside him, watching winter claim the world outside his window. At 58, his face was a roadmap of wars fought and friends lost. Gray hair had replaced the dark brown of his youth, but his blue eyes remained sharp, missing nothing. On the mantel above the fireplace, metals from Desert Storm gathered dust beside a photograph he tried not to look at too often. The photograph showed 12 young men and women in UED-F uniforms standing on the red sand of Mars before the final battle. Brennan was there 30 years younger still, believing wars could be won cleanly. 6 of those faces had come home in body bags. 3 more had come home, broken in ways that couldn't be fixed. Only 3 had made it out whole, and Brennan wasn't sure he counted among them. The soft chime of his secure comm unit shattered the silence. That particular tone hadn't sounded in 3 years, not since his retirement papers went through. Brennan frowned at the device, then sighed and accepted the transmission. General Caldwell Patterson's face materialized in the holographic display, as crisp and military perfect as when Brennan had served under him in Iraq back when they were both young and stupid and thought they understood how the world worked. "Thad," Patterson said without preamble, "we need you. You said that last time, Caldwell. I'm done. Station Alpha on Cryosis went dark 2 weeks ago. No distress call, no warning, just silence." Brennan picked up the whiskey glass, studied the amber liquid. "Send a reconnaissance team. You've got plenty of qualified personnel." "We did. They haven't reported back either." That got Brennan's attention. He set down the glass without drinking. "Intelligence suggests Zarathian involvement," Patterson continued. "If they're violating the peace accord, this could restart the war. We need someone they might actually listen to instead of just killing on sight." "I'm a soldier, Caldwell, not a diplomat. You're the only human who negotiated face-to-face with them and after Mars. The only one who killed their general and lived to talk about it. They respect you, Thad, even if they hate you." Brennan closed his eyes, seeing Kren's command ship in the targeting reticle, seeing the moment he gave the order, seeing the explosion that saved 10,000 civilians and killed the one Zarathian who might have actually wanted peace, manipulated though he was. "I'm too old for this. You're 58, not dead. The Artemis leaves in 16 hours. Captain Cross will brief you en route. Please, Thad, if this goes wrong, we're looking at full-scale war again. Millions dead on both sides." Brennan looked at the photograph on the mantel, at the faces of friends who had died for a war that should never have been fought. "Fine," he said finally. "One last mission. Then I'm done for good this time." "Thank you, Thad." The transmission ended. Brennan sat in silence for a long moment, then drained the whiskey in one burning swallow. Some wounds never healed. Some debts could never be paid. But maybe, just maybe, he could keep more people from ending up as faces in photographs. He had no way of knowing that in 66 hours, his DNA would be creating something unprecedented in the womb of an alien queen. The UEDF Artemis cut through the blackness of space, its antimatter engines leaving a soft blue contrail against the void. The ship was state-of-the-art, designed for rapid response to potential treaty violations, equipped with enough firepower to level a small city and enough diplomatic facilities to prevent having to use it. Brennan stood at the observation viewport in his assigned quarters, watching the stars blur as the ship prepared for the jump to the cryosis system. The door hissed open behind him. "Colonel Brennan." He turned to find Captain Evelyn Cross entering her EDF uniform, crisp and perfect blonde hair pulled back in a regulation bun that somehow made her look both professional and severe. At 32, she was young enough to be his daughter and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never truly failed at anything important. Captain, Brennan acknowledged with a nod that wasn't quite a salute. He was retired, technically civilian now, which meant he didn't have to bother with some of the military courtesies. I wanted to brief you personally, Cross said, activating a holographic display between them. Cryosis materialized in the air, a frozen marble orbiting a distant sun. Station Alpha was established 3 years ago as neutral ground for human Zarathian diplomatic meetings. Small staff, mostly scientists and communications personnel. 23 people total. What were the biological readings that spooked Command? Cross's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Unknown organic signatures. Not human, not matching any known Zarathian biomarkers. The transmission cut off mid-analysis. Brennan studied the planet, noting the small zone at the equator where the monitoring station was marked. Weapons research. Possibly, or something else. That's what you are here to determine. After Cross left, Brennan conducted his routine security sweep of the quarters. Old habits from years of operating in hostile territory. He checked the ventilation system first, then the power conduits, then the access panels behind the furniture. Behind the third panel, he found it. The tracking device was small military grade and broadcasting on UEDF encryption frequencies. Someone wanted to know exactly where he was at all times. Someone inside the military structure had planted it before launch. Brennan stared at the device for a long moment, then carefully replaced the panel without disturbing it. He said nothing to Cross, nothing to anyone. If there was a traitor on board or back on Earth, showing his hand too early would only make things worse. But now he knew. This mission was compromised before it even began. The alarms began blaring 4 hours into the journey, yanking Brennan from uneasy sleep. He was moving before his conscious mind fully registered the danger decades of combat training taking over. The deck shuddered violently beneath his feet as he grabbed his tactical vest and sidearm. All hands to emergency stations. Cross's voice crackled over the shipwide comm. We have a critical system failure. This is not a drill. Brennan burst into the corridor to find chaos. Crew members ran in all directions as red emergency lights bathed everything in an apocalyptic glow. He fought his way to the bridge using his bulk and experience to navigate through the panic. Cross was at the main console, her fingers flying over the controls, professional composure cracking at the edges. Main navigation is compromised, life support failing, engine controls locked out. Attack, Brennan demanded, scanning the tactical displays. Negative, internal, some kind of virus in the system. She looked up and Brennan saw real fear in her eyes. Colonel, the virus uses UEDF encryption protocols. This came from inside. The implications hit like a physical blow. Not just a traitor, a saboteur, someone who wanted this mission to fail badly enough to kill everyone on board. Can you isolate it? I'm trying to wall off critical systems, but a violent explosion rocked the ship, throwing Brennan against the bulkhead hard enough to crack his ribs. Alarms shrieked as new damage reports cascaded across every display. Antimatter containment breach, Cross shouted over the noise. We've got minutes at best. Brennan hit the ship-wide comm. All personnel to escape pods immediately. This is not a drill. Evacuate now. The next few minutes blurred into a nightmare of motion and shouted orders. Brennan helped young crew members into pods, then went back for stragglers. In the science lab, he found Dr. Helena Bradford trapped behind a collapsed bulkhead, flames already spreading through the room's oxygen-rich atmosphere. Colonel, she called through the intercom, her voice distorted by heat and fear. I've uploaded everything to your personal comm device. The genetic data from cryosis, it's not what they think. The explosion cut her off. Fire engulfed the lab in a bloom of white-hot fury. Brennan staggered back, shielding his face, but there was nothing he could do. Bradford was gone. At the last escape pod, Cross was waiting. Everyone else is out. We're the last. Brennan ducked into the cramped space beside her, barely fitting his frame into a seat designed for smaller personnel. Cross's fingers moved across the pod's controls with desperate precision. I found the virus signature, she said as she initiated the launch sequence. Colonel Vincent Hendricks, UEDF Strategic Planning. Hendricks, Brennan felt ice in his gut. I served with him in Afghanistan. He's a war hawk, always has been, but I never thought. The pod ejected with a violent lurch just as the Artemis's reactor reached critical mass. Through the small viewport, Brennan watched the ship that had been their home for 4 hours erupt into a miniature sun. The blast wave hit their pod moments later, sending it tumbling end over end, all control lost. "Brace for impact," Cross shouted, but her voice was lost as the pod's system shorted out, plunging them into darkness and silence. The last thing Brennan saw before unconsciousness claimed him was the white expanse of cryosis rising to meet them, growing larger and larger until it filled the entire viewport. Then nothing. Cold. That was the first thing that returned to consciousness. Cold so intense it burned, seeping through every layer of clothing and into bone and marrow. Brennan's eyes opened to a world of white and gray. The escape pod split open like a sardine can, wine howling through the jagged breach. He moved carefully, testing for injuries. Bruised ribs, definitely. Possible concussion. Cuts and scrapes that were already freezing in the -70-degree environment. But alive. Against all odds, alive. "Cross," he croaked, his voice rough from smoke inhalation. She lay slumped in her harness, a nasty gash across her forehead, painting her blonde hair red. Brennan checked her pulse, weak but steady, then shook her gently. "Captain, wake up." Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. "Did we make it? We're down. Can you move?" She nodded, wincing. Brennan helped her unbuckle, supporting her weight as they stumbled toward the pod's emergency supplies. Thermal survival suits rated for extreme cold. Medical kit. Emergency rations. A distress beacon that probably wouldn't penetrate cryosis's magnetic interference. 2 sidearms with limited ammunition. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. They suited up quickly, the thermal layers providing immediate relief from the killing cold. Outside the pod, the landscape was an alien nightmare of white and deeper white, wind-sculpted ice formations rising like monuments to some frozen god. Visibility extended maybe 20 feet before the blizzard swallowed everything. Brennan checked his compass, but the needle spun uselessly in cryosis's magnetic field. He looked up, searching for any break in the clouds that might reveal the system's sun and give him a bearing. "There," Cross said, pointing. Through a momentary gap in the storm, Brennan saw it. A faint glow on the horizon, too steady and regular to be natural. "Man-made, or Zarathian-made. Does it matter? We'll freeze to death in hours without shelter." She was right. Brennan adjusted their heading, and they set off into the blizzard, fighting against wind that threatened to knock them down with every step. Each breath was a struggle, each meter forward a victory against a planet that wanted them dead. Time lost meaning in the white void. Minutes felt like hours. Brennan focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on keeping Cross moving, when she stumbled on the distant glow that slowly, agonizingly grew brighter. As they drew closer, details emerged from the storm. Crystalline towers rising 50 feet into the air, glowing with an inner blue-green light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Architecture that seemed to grow from the ice itself rather than being built upon it. Angular, organic, beautiful in an alien way. "Zarathian," Brennan said grimly. "Military outpost by the design." "Are we surrendering?" Cross asked through chattering teeth. Brennan checked his sidearm, more from habit than any belief it would do much good against Zarathian warriors. "We're seeking shelter under the peace accord. Article 7. But stay alert." They approached the perimeter, leaving the storm's protection and entering the outpost's defensive zone. No guards were visible, but Brennan knew they were being watched. Zarathians never left their territory undefended. As if summoned by his thoughts, the snow before them erupted. 3 massive figures rose from concealed positions, ice and camouflage falling away to reveal 8-foot-tall warriors. Their scales shimmered with iridescent patterns, even in the dim light, shifting through colors Brennan suspected human eyes weren't fully equipped to see. Plasma spears materialized in their hands, the weapons humming with barely contained energy. The warriors' eyes caught the light pupils contracting to vertical slits as they assessed the intruders. The central warrior stepped forward, his scales shifting to a deeper red that Brennan remembered from intelligence briefings meant either suspicion or aggression, possibly both. Brennan slowly raised his hands, motioning for Cross to do the same. No sudden movements, no threatening gestures, everything slow and clear. I am Colonel Thaddeus Brennan, United Earth Defense Force, he said, projecting his voice to carry over the wind. We seek temporary sanctuary under Article 7 of the Peace Accord between our peoples. The Central Warrior studied him for a long moment, scales rippling through subtle patterns Brennan couldn't interpret. Then the warrior touched a communication device on his armor and spoke rapidly in the clicking musical language of the Zorathians. After what felt like an eternity, the warrior's coloring changed to a more neutral blue-green. He gestured toward the central structure with his plasma spear. You will be escorted to the command center. Her Majesty will decide your fate. Brennan felt his blood run cold despite the thermal suit. Her Majesty, Empress Zara. The warrior confirmed his subharmonic voice, making the name resonate in Brennan's chest. Sister of General Kren, she commands this sector. Cross's sharp intake of breath was audible even through her helmet. Brennan kept his expression neutral through sheer force of will. Of all the Zorathian commanders they could have encountered, Zara was simultaneously the best and worst possibility. Best because she had a reputation for following protocols. Worst because he had killed her brother. We accept Her Majesty's judgment, Brennan said formally. The warriors escorted them between the crystalline towers, which thrummed with power as they passed. The interior of the outpost was surprisingly warm, the walls glowing with the same bioluminescence as the exterior. Corridors twisted in organic patterns that seemed to defy human architectural logic, branching and rejoining like blood vessels in some vast living body. They were led to a circular chamber at the heart of the structure. The ceiling soared 30 feet above a dome of what looked like ice but didn't melt in the warmth. Bioluminescent patterns pulsed across every surface in mesmerizing rhythms. In the center of the room stood a raised dais, and upon it a throne that appeared to have been grown rather than built from the same crystalline material as the rest of the outpost. And on that throne sat Empress Zara. Even seated, her height was intimidating. Her burgundy scales were deeper in color than the warrior's, almost wine-dark, with patterns that pulsed golden when she moved. Her face was angular, with high cheekbones and a proud jawline that spoke of royal bloodlines stretching back millennia. But it was her eyes that held Brennan, vertical pupils that widened slightly as she regarded the humans before her. Copper-colored hair, fine as silk, flowed down her shoulders, adorned with small, crystalline ornaments that chimed softly when she shifted position. She wore form-fitting armor that seemed to be a second skin, protective, yet allowing full range of motion with sections that glowed with the same energy as their weapons. A circlet of unknown metal sat upon her brow, symbols etched into its surface that probably meant something significant in Zorathian culture. She radiated authority, power, and something else. Intelligence. This was not a warrior queen who ruled by strength alone. This was someone who thought, who calculated, who played games at levels most couldn't comprehend. Thaddeus Brennan, she said, her voice melodious yet carrying an undercurrent of danger that made every instinct scream at him to run. The Butcher of Mars stands before me, seeking sanctuary. Brennan met her gaze, forcing himself not to look away from those alien eyes. Showing fear now would be fatal. I am a soldier who followed orders, Your Majesty, as did General Kren. A ripple of tension passed through the assembled guards. Several hands tightened on weapons. Zara's coloring flashed briefly with patterns of crimson and gold anger, perhaps, though Brennan couldn't be certain. You dare speak of him? She hissed, rising to her full height. Standing, she towered over Brennan by more than 2 feet. You who led the assault that took his life. I led the defense that responded to his attack, Your Majesty. An attack that violated ceasefire negotiations already underway. An attack that killed 2,000 civilians, including children. Zara descended from her dais with fluid grace that belied her size. She circled Brennan, slowly examining him as one might examine an unusual specimen. He stood still, letting her look, keeping his hands visible and non-threatening. You humans, she said softly, close enough now that he could smell something like cinnamon and ozone coming from her scales. So fragile in body, yet so dangerous in your deceptions. My brother believed the ceasefire was a ruse to allow your forces to regroup. He was lied to, Brennan said, by advisors who wanted the war to continue. We've since identified several of them. They've been arrested. As have ours, Zara admitted, stopping in front of him again. Though that knowledge came too late for Kren. Cross stepped forward, her diplomatic training overriding her fear. Your Majesty, we came to investigate the silence from our monitoring station. Our ship was sabotaged. We're not here as aggressors. Zara's attention shifted to Cross-Eyes narrowing. And who might you be, small one? Captain Evelyn Cross, ADF Science Division. Science? Zara repeated as if tasting the word. Always your excuse for espionage. She returned to her throne, settling into it with regal poise. For several moments, she simply observed them, her coloring shifting through subtle patterns Brennan couldn't interpret. The peace between our peoples is fragile, she finally said. One among my people and yours, I suspect, would prefer it broken. Was that the purpose of your mission, Colonel, to provoke an incident that would justify renewed conflict? No, Your Majesty. If I wanted conflict, I wouldn't have helped negotiate the peace in the first place. Zara tilted her head, studying him with renewed interest. Yet here you are on a planet where you should not be, in an outpost you should never have found. Our ship was sabotaged by someone in our own military, Brennan said. We had no choice but to land here. All we ask is sanctuary until the storm passes. Then we'll try to locate our people and leave. Zara was silent for a long moment, patterns pulsing with a slow, steady rhythm across her skin. Finally, she spoke. You will be granted conditional sanctuary as the Accord demands, but you will be confined to guest quarters and monitored at all times. Any attempt to access our systems or communicate with your forces will be considered an act of aggression. She fixed Brennan with her stare. And Colonel, know this. Unlike human Zarathians never forget their blood debts. My brother's death remains unpaid. She gestured to the guards. Take them to the South Quadrant. Provide food and medical attention, but watch them closely. As they were led away, Brennan glanced back to see Zara watching him, her coloring now showing a pattern he hadn't seen before. Not anger or suspicion, but something else entirely. Something that made him uneasy in a way the threats had not. That went well, Cross muttered as they were escorted down another twisting corridor. She didn't kill us outright. She blames me personally for her brother's death, Brennan said. I noticed. Do you think she'll honor the sanctuary? Brennan thought about those eyes, that calculating intelligence. She'll honor it. The question is what she plans to do after. The guest quarters were a single large chamber with furniture designed for beings much larger than humans. Low crystalline platforms that served as beds, strange curved structures that might have been chairs, and a table-like surface that emerged seamlessly from the floor. The walls pulsed with the same bioluminescence as the rest of the facility, providing constant soft light. A guard brought them food nutrient cubes that, while bland, were at least compatible with human physiology. Another brought medical supplies for their injuries. Then they were left alone, though Brennan had no doubt every word and movement was being monitored. Cross treated the gash on her head, then collapsed onto one of the crystalline platforms. I need to rest. Wake me in a few hours. Brennan nodded, watching as she quickly fell into an exhausted sleep. Once her breathing deepened and steadied, he pulled out his personal comm device, the one Dr. Bradford had uploaded data to before her death. The Zarathians hadn't confiscated it, perhaps believing it wouldn't function within their facility's interference field. They were right about external communication, but the internal memory was still accessible. The files were encrypted, but Brennan had been given emergency override codes for exactly such situations. What he found made his blood run cold despite the room's comfortable temperature. Dr. Bradford had been analyzing biological samples from cryosis samples that showed evidence of genetic experimentation. The Zarathians appeared to be developing something combining their own DNA with human genetic material in ways that shouldn't be feasible. More disturbing were the security files, footage from the monitoring station time-stamped and authenticated. The personnel being executed shot in the back as they tried to flee. And the orders clear as day, coming from a Zarathian officer whose signature read General Vex, not Zara. Vex. Brennan dug deeper, cross-referenced the data, found encrypted communications between Vex and someone on the human side. The encryption was military-grade, but Bradford had managed to crack part of it before her death. Colonel Vincent Hendricks, the same man whose virus signature had destroyed the Artemis. The conspiracy went deeper than he'd imagined. Not just one traitor, but a coordinated effort across both species to restart the war. But why? What could Vex and Hendricks possibly gain from renewed conflict? The answer came in the financial records Bradford had uncovered. Weapons contracts, resource rights, territory claims that would be valuable only in wartime, Billions of credits changing hands fortunes eyes to be made from other people's deaths. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. The door to their chamber was opening. Brennan quickly pocketed the comm as a Zarathian guard entered. Her Majesty commands your presence, Colonel Brennan. Only you. Brennan glanced at the still sleeping cross. My colleague remains here. You alone are summoned. Something in the guard's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. Brennan stood following the towering figure through the twisting corridors of the outpost. Instead of returning to the throne room, he was led deeper into the facility, past areas where Zarathian scientists worked at stations made of the same crystalline material as everything else. They regarded him with open curiosity or hostility as he passed, their coloring shifting through patterns he couldn't read. Finally, they arrived at a small chamber that appeared to be a private study. Empress Zara stood with her back to the door, examining a three-dimensional holographic display of what looked like molecular structures. The guard bowed and departed, leaving Brennan alone with the alien queen who had every reason to want him dead. For a long moment, she didn't acknowledge his presence, continuing to manipulate the holographic molecules with graceful gestures of her long-scaled fingers. Brennan waited patient, watching the play of light across her burgundy skin. "Do you know why we fought your kind, Colonel?" she asked without turning. "Resources, territory, the usual reasons species go to war." That sound emerged from her again, the one he was beginning to recognize as laughter. "So simple, your understanding. No, we fought because your genetic structure fascinated our scientists. Humans adapt so quickly, evolve so rapidly compared to us. We wish to understand this trait." She turned to face him, her eyes unreadable. "Did you ever wonder why we agreed to peace? We were winning after all." The question caught Brennan off guard. It was true, the Zarathians had been pushing humanity back on all fronts when they suddenly agreed to ceasefire talks. "I assumed your casualties were higher than we estimated." "Our casualties were acceptable," she replied dismissively. "No, we stopped because we had obtained what we needed. Genetic samples from thousands of human prisoners. Enough to conduct our research without further conflict." Brennan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the planet's temperature. "You're creating biological weapons." Patterns that might have indicated amusement rippled across her skin. "Is that what your scientists concluded from her stolen samples? How predictably human to assume the worst." She gestured to the holographic display. "This is not a weapon, Colonel. It is the future. A way to end conflict between our species permanently. By changing us or eliminating us. By understanding the fundamental biological barriers that make our species incompatible," she said, studying him intently. "Humans and Zarathians cannot reproduce together. Our biochemistry is too different. This creates an unbridgeable gap between our peoples. We will always see each other as potential enemies rather than potential allies." Brennan stared at the display, beginning to understand. "You're trying to create hybrids, Zarathian-human crosses." "We are exploring possibilities," she corrected. "Theoretical research permitted under the scientific cooperation clause of our treaty." Theoretical. Brennan didn't believe it for a second. Then why the secrecy? Why was our monitoring station silenced? Her coloring darkened. "Your monitoring station discovered our research facility and misinterpreted its purpose just as you have. They attempted to steal our data. In the process, they triggered automated defense systems." "They're dead." "Unfortunately, yes. An automated response we could not countermand in time." Her expression was unreadable. "Their bodies have been preserved according to protocols. When communication is restored, they will be returned to Earth." Brennan processed this information, not sure if he believed her explanation. "And our ship, the Artemis, was that an automated response too?" "We had nothing to do with your ship's malfunction," Zara said sharply, "though its timing was convenient for certain factions within both our governments who prefer conflict to cooperation." "What are you suggesting?" Zara moved closer, her towering height making him have to look up to meet her eyes. This close, he could see the intricate patterns in her scales, the subtle shifts of color that seemed to reflect her thoughts. "I am suggesting, Colonel Brennan, that neither of us may be here by accident. That perhaps those who wish the peace to fail engineered this situation. To what end? To restart a war that benefits weapons manufacturers and power-hungry military leaders on both sides," she said bluntly. My brother was manipulated into attacking your Mars base by advisors who assured him Earth was preparing a major offensive. I suspect similar manipulations are at work now. Brennan thought of the tracking device he'd found the virus that had taken down a state-of-the-art military vessel with ease. The pieces were starting to fit together in a picture he didn't like. If you believe that, he said carefully, why tell me? Why not just eliminate us as potential complications? Her coloring shifted to that pattern he'd seen before, bands of blue and purple pulsing slowly across her body. Because you intrigue me, Colonel. You fought fiercely against my kind, yet you worked harder than anyone to secure peace. You killed my brother, yet you did so to protect your people, not out of hatred for mine. She paused, those eyes searching his face. You are a contradiction, and I find myself wanting to understand you. Before Brennan could respond, a tremor shook the outpost. Fine crystalline dust sifted down from the ceiling as the floor vibrated beneath their feet. Zara's head whipped toward the door, her coloring flashing with alarm. That was not seismic activity. Another tremor, more violent, followed by a distant sound like thunder. Alarm calls began to echo through the facility, the musical Zarathian language taking on urgent staccato tones. A guard burst through the door, scales flashing with rapid patterns of red and orange. Your Majesty, the outpost is under attack. By whom? Zara demanded. Unknown, my lady, a massive creature approaching from the polar regions. Our sensors show it's a third impact close enough to throw them all to the floor, cut off the guard's report. Part of the ceiling collapsed, revealing conduits filled with glowing blue-green liquid. Through the breach in the wall, Brennan caught his first glimpse of the attacker. Massive, at least 30 feet tall, its form obscured by ice and darkness, but clearly enormous. Where it touched the outpost structures, they frosted over and shattered. Frost behemoth. Zara said, her voice tight with something that might have been fear. They never venture this far from the poles. Something must have drawn it here. She was already moving her royal bearing, transforming into military command as she ran toward the command center. Brennan followed without being asked, his soldiers' instincts overriding everything else. The command center had transformed into organized chaos. Zarathian warriors rushed to defensive positions, while technicians worked frantically at crystalline consoles that pulsed with urgent red light. Through the viewport, the frost behemoth loomed like a mountain, given terrible life, its form shifting between solid ice and vapor as it advanced. Empress Zara stood at the center of the activity, her copper hair whipping as emergency systems vented excess heat. Her burgundy coloring had deepened to crimson, the shade of battle readiness patterns flowing across her skin like living fire. All warriors to defensive formation, Kren 7. She commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos with absolute authority. Concentrate fire on the central mass rotation pattern, prevent it from phasing through our attacks. Brennan watched from the entrance, momentarily forgotten in the crisis. This was Zara as military commander, not diplomatic queen. Every movement precise, every order calculated. She was magnificent in a way that transcended species. A Zarathian tactical officer called out, Your Majesty, the creature is not responding to standard deterrence. It appears to be drawn to our power signatures. Then we give it a target it cannot ignore, Zara said. She turned to her weapons master. Activate the thermal lances, full power. Make it choose between us and the outpost infrastructure. As the warriors moved to execute her orders, Zara's eyes found Brennan across the room. For a moment, something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or the acknowledgement that survival required setting aside old hatreds. Colonel Brennan, she said, can you use Zarathian weapons? I learned fast, Your Majesty. The slightest curve touched her angular features, almost a smile. Then you fight with us. Try not to die. I still haven't decided if I want to kill you myself. Before Brennan could respond, the behemoth struck. A massive limb of semi-solid ice crashed through the outer wall, sending shards of crystalline material flying like shrapnel. The temperature in the command center plummeted instantly, frost spreading across every surface. Zara was already moving a plasma spear, materializing in her hands as she charged toward the breach. Her warriors followed, but she led from the front, every inch the warrior queen her brother had been a warrior king. The behemoth's limb swept toward her, a club of frozen death. Zara rolled beneath it with fluid grace, coming up to drive her spear into what might have been a joint. Energy crackled across the creature's surface, but it barely slowed. It's phasing, one of the warriors shouted. Solid to vapor, our weapons pass through. Zara's tactical mind worked at lightning speed. Pattern recognition it must solidify to strike. Hit it in the moment of transition. She demonstrated waiting as another limb descended, then striking the instant before impact. The spear bit deep, and the creature keened a sound that made the air itself vibrate with frequencies human ears couldn't fully process. But the floor beneath Zara cracked under the temperature stress. Zarathian construction was strong, but nothing was designed to withstand the absolute cold the behemoth radiated. Fissures spread like lightning, and suddenly the crystalline surface gave way. Zara fell. Time seemed to slow for Brennan. He saw her eyes widen, saw her spear spinning away, saw the behemoth's massive limb descending to crush her against the floor below. Every rational thought screamed at him to use the distraction to escape. Instead, he ran. His boots found purchase on the crumbling edge. He dove, catching Zara's arm as she fell, his shoulder nearly dislocating from her weight. 8 feet of muscle and scale and royal dignity dangled from his grip as the floor continued to collapse around them. "Let go," Zara shouted. "You cannot hold us both." "Respectfully, your majesty, shut up." Brennan pulled muscles, screaming ribs, protesting, using every ounce of strength left in his 58-year-old frame. He got her high enough that she could grab the edge herself, and together they scrambled back from the widening pit. The behemoth's limbs struck where Zara had been moments before, turning the floor to brittle shards. They lay on the stable section, breathing hard. Zara stared at him, her coloring rippling through shades he'd never seen before. Purple and blue and gold all mixing together. "You saved me." "Yeah, you could have escaped." "Thought about it." "Why didn't you?" Brennan met those alien eyes. "Because you're not my enemy, your majesty. Just someone on the wrong side of a bad situation. And because it was the right thing to do." Something shifted in Zara's expression. The way she looked at him changed fundamentally in that moment. Not the human who killed Kren, not the enemy seeking sanctuary. Something else entirely. But there was no time for analysis. Her plasma spear had fallen into the pit. The behemoth was preparing another strike, and they were defenseless. Brennan saw it first. The fire staff, one of the emergency weapons mounted on the wall. He lunged for it, his hand closing around the grip. The weapon should have burned human flesh to ash. It was calibrated to Zarathian biology, attuned to their unique bioelectric signatures. Multiple warnings in the intelligence briefings had been clear. Human contact with Zarathian energy weapons meant instant death. Instead, it hummed to life in Brennan's hand. Power flowed through the staff, responding to his intent as naturally as his own sidearm. He didn't question it, didn't analyze. He simply acted. The fire staff blazed with concentrated heat as Brennan aimed at the behemoth's central mass. The beam struck true, creating a high-pitched keening as ice met fire. Steam exploded outward, temporarily blinding everyone. When visibility returned, the creature had retreated, leaving a gaping hole in the outpost wall, through which the howling blizzard now poured. Brennan stood amidst the destruction, the fire staff still humming in his hands, Zarathian warriors surrounding him with weapons, half raised in shock and confusion. Zara rose to her full height, brushing ice crystals from her scales. She approached Brennan slowly, her expression unreadable to human eyes. Around them, her warriors waited for her command, fingers tight on triggers. "Colonel Brennan," she said softly, her voice carrying to every corner of the damaged command center. "You wield a weapon that should have killed you instantly. You saved your enemy's life at risk of your own. You fought for my people as if they were yours." She inclined her head, the Zarathian equivalent of a bow. The gesture shocked every Zarathian present more than the behemoth attack had. "Perhaps," Zara continued, "we have more to discuss than I first thought. Come, we have much to speak of and very little time." As the warriors lowered their weapons, uncertainty evident in their postures, Brennan noticed something. During the fight, the broken conduits had sprayed both him and Zara with that glowing blue-green catalyst fluid. It covered their hands, had soaked through damaged sections of armor and clothing. Neither of them knew it yet, but their DNA was already beginning an unprecedented dance facilitated by the unique properties of a substance found nowhere else in the galaxy. The future of two species had just been conceived in combat and chaos. Empress Zara sat in her private medical chamber 6 hours after the behemoth attack, trying not to show weakness as doctor. Kira ran another diagnostic scan. The silver-blue scaled physician was the only one Zara trusted completely, family by blood and loyalty by choice. The symptoms began after the creature's assault, Kira asked, her subharmonic voice carrying concern. Yes, nausea, scale discoloration, fatigue beyond what the combat should have caused. Zara studied her own hand, noting the slight darkening around the edges of her scales. Is it poison? Some weapon the creature carried. Kira's coloring rippled with patterns that indicated deep thought. She manipulated the holographic display, comparing readings to baseline Zarathian physiology. Then she stopped, her entire body going rigid. Your Majesty, when you say you had direct contact with the human during the fight, Colonel Brennan pulled me from the collapse. We were both covered in catalyst fluid from the broken conduits. Why? Kira's silence stretched too long. Zara felt something close to fear, an emotion she'd thought herself beyond. Kira, tell me. My queen, I need to run one more scan. A very specific scan. But you should know that what I'm looking for is theoretically unprecedented. What are you looking for? Kira hesitated, her coloring shifting through shades that indicated profound uncertainty. Evidence of genetic fusion, the catalyst fluid. It's designed to facilitate cellular integration for our research. But it requires specific conditions, controlled environments. In the wild, with the electromagnetic properties of cryosis and the stress hormones from combat. And she trailed off, staring at her instruments. Zara's voice was dangerously quiet. And if both subjects possessed exactly the right genetic markers, if the environmental conditions were perfect, if the stress response triggered the precise hormonal cascade needed, then theoretically, impossibly, the catalyst might facilitate natural genetic fusion between incompatible species. The implications crashed over Zara like a physical wave. You're saying I might be carrying human genetic material. I'm saying, Your Majesty, that you need to lie back and allow me to conduct a proper examination. A comprehensive one. The clinical request in such a dignified setting would have been laughable under any other circumstances. Zara stared at her cousin, her friend, her physician, and saw nothing but concern and scientific fascination warring in those silver-blue features. Do it, Zara said finally. And Kira, no one else knows. Not yet. Not until we understand what this means. Zara positioned herself on the examination platform, her copper hair spreading across the crystalline surface. Even in this vulnerable situation, she maintained the bearing of royalty, spine straight, expression composed. But her coloring betrayed her, shifting through patterns of uncertainty and apprehension. Kira worked with professional efficiency, the Zarathian medical scanner, humming as it played across Zara's body. Minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by the soft chime of data being recorded and analyzed. Finally, Kira spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Your Majesty, the readings are... I need to verify these results. This cannot be accurate. Show me. Kira brought up the holographic display. Zara's biology was mapped in 3 dimensions, every organ, every system rendered in glowing detail. And they're highlighted in a color that indicated foreign material was something new, something that shouldn't exist. Hybrid genetic material, Kira said, her subharmonics carrying notes of awe and disbelief. Human and Zarathian DNA already fusing at the cellular level. Your Majesty, you are pregnant with a hybrid child, Colonel Brennan's child. The room seemed to tilt. Zara gripped the edge of the examination platform, her claws actually scoring marks in the crystalline surface. That's not feasible. I said the same thing multiple times, but the scans are conclusive. Kira pulled up additional data. The catalyst fluid temporarily restructured your cellular membranes. Cryosis's magnetic field created quantum tunneling effects at the molecular level, and you both apparently carry recessive genetic sequences that allow for cross-species compatibility. The odds were astronomical, but here we are. Zara placed one scaled hand over her abdomen, where something unprecedented was beginning to grow. How far along? Approximately 6 hours. But it's developing rapidly, already equivalent to what would be 2 weeks in a normal Zarathian pregnancy. At this rate, Kira's coloring darkened with concern. Your Majesty, I don't know if your biology can sustain this. The growth rate is beyond anything we've studied. Can you slow it? Not without risking the hybrid's viability. And frankly, we have no precedent for this. No research, no data, nothing. Before Zara could respond, her comm device chimed with an urgent tone. She activated it, grateful for the distraction from the impossible news. the face of her tactical officer appeared. Your Majesty, we've detected two ships approaching Cryosis, one Zarathian, one human. Zara's blood went cold. Identification. The Zarathian vessel is General Vex's flagship, and the human ship is the UOED F Interceptor, Captain James Garrett commanding, both maintaining communication silence. Time to arrival. 4 hours for Vex, 6 for the human vessel. Zara's tactical mind immediately began calculating possibilities, none of them good. Understood. Maintain monitoring. Alert me to any changes. She ended the transmission and turned to Kira. We have a more immediate problem than my condition. If Vex discovers humans here, he'll use it as justification to restart the war. And if he discovers your pregnancy, Kira asked quietly. Zara's coloring shifted to determined crimson. He won't. Not until I'm ready to reveal it on my own terms. Help me up. I need to speak with Colonel Brennan, and we need to plan our escape. Captain Evelyn Cross had not remained in their quarters as instructed. The moment the guards had rushed toward the behemoth crisis, her intelligence training overrode her diplomatic restraint. She had 90 seconds before the security systems would route around the damage and detect her absence. Cross made them count. The research laboratory was 3 levels down, protected by biometric locks that were useless when the power fluctuations from the attack disrupted their functions. The door slid open at her touch, and Cross entered a chamber that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The cylindrical tank dominated the center of the room, filled with luminescent fluid. And suspended within it, neither quite solid nor quite hologram, was the figure. Human and Zarathian features blended in ways that shouldn't be achievable. Scaled skin and patches across otherwise smooth flesh. A face that was simultaneously familiar and utterly alien. Neither species, but somehow both. Cross's fingers flew across the Zarathian interface, her linguistic training allowing her to parse the written language. What she found made her blood run cold. Genetic compatibility research. Successful fusion attempts. Projected timelines for viable hybrid offspring. And underneath it all, the cold equations of what this meant. If the two species could interbreed, the political implications would shatter every assumption both governments had made. But there was more. Hidden files encrypted even within the secure laboratory. Cross's fingers danced across the controls, her background in signals intelligence, giving her edges the Zarathians hadn't anticipated. Security footage appeared. The monitoring station personnel running through corridors, Zarathian warriors pursuing. And then the executions, clinical and efficient bodies falling as plasma fire burned through flesh and bone. The timestamp made her pause. The orders had come from someone with high-level clearance, someone who wanted the monitoring team dead before they could report what they'd found. General Vex. Cross downloaded everything to a portable data crystal, then heard footsteps approaching. She barely made it out before guards arrived, slipping back into the main corridors and blending with the chaos of repair crews. When she returned to their quarters, Brennan was waiting covered in frost and looking like he'd aged another decade. "Where were you?" he asked quietly. "Getting answers," Cross replied. She showed him the data crystal. "You need to see this kernel, all of it." What she didn't mention was the final file she'd glimpsed before fleeing, the one labeled Genesis Protocol, with clearance levels so high even her hacking skills couldn't penetrate it. Whatever the Zarathians were really doing on Cryosis, the hybrid research was only part of the picture. Colonel Brennan studied the data. Cross had recovered, his weathered face growing grimmer with each file. They sat in their quarters speaking in low tones, even though they assumed every word was monitored. "Vex ordered the executions directly," Cross said. "And look at this, the communications intercepts. He's been in contact with someone on our side." Brennan pulled up the encrypted transmissions. The signature was partially corrupted, but enough remained. "Hendricks. Same bastard who sabotaged the Artemis. It's a coordinated conspiracy. Restart the war profit from the conflict. Vex positions himself as the avenging hero after Zara's assassination by humans. Hendricks and his cronies get their weapons contracts and territorial expansion. And millions die in the crossfire," Brennan finished. He stood pacing the small space. "We need to warn someone, both governments. With what communication system, we're trapped on an ice planet in a Zarathian military outpost. Even if we could get a signal out, who would believe us? Vex and Hendricks would just claim we're trying to save ourselves." Brennan stopped pacing. "Zara. We tell Zara. The queen who wants you dead for killing her brother, that Zara. She's not part of this conspiracy. The research the monitoring team Death's Vex kept it all from her. If we show her the evidence, she might just think we faked it. Brennan said slowly. She might realize we're all being played, that her brother died for lies and she's next on the chopping block. Before Cross could respond, the door opened. A Zarathian guard entered, scales flashing with formal patterns. Colonel Brennan, Her Majesty requests your presence. Immediately, in her private chambers. Cross raised an eyebrow. That's either very good or very bad. Only one way to find out, Brennan said, following the guard into the corridor. Zara's private chambers were smaller than Brennan expected, more personal than the formal throne room or command center. Holographic star charts decorated the walls, showing both human and Zarathian territories. A memorial shrine occupied one corner, and Brennan recognized the crystalline fragments as Zarathian death rituals. Kren's shrine, her brother's final resting place. Zara stood before the viewport, watching the blizzard rage across Cryosis's frozen landscape. She didn't turn when Brennan entered, but her coloring shifted, acknowledging his presence. Do you believe in fate, Colonel Brennan? I believe in choices, Your Majesty, and consequences. Philosophical. Now she turned, and Brennan saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. Dr. Kira has completed her medical analysis of both of us. Both. The fire staff you wielded should have killed you. Zarathian energy weapons are calibrated to our specific bioelectric signatures. The fact that you could use it suggests compatibility at a fundamental biological level. Brennan felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. The catalyst fluid. Combined with Cryosis's unique electromagnetic properties, the stress hormones from combat, and apparently very specific genetic markers that neither of us knew we possessed. Her coloring shifted to that deep purple he'd seen before. Colonel Brennan, Thaddeus, there's no diplomatic way to say this, so I'll be direct. I'm carrying genetic material that is not Zarathian, material that appears to be human, specifically yours. The room seemed to tilt. Brennan grabbed the edge of a crystalline table for support. That's not achievable. I said the same thing, multiple times. Dr. Kira assures me the scans are accurate. Under conditions that exist nowhere else in the galaxy, human and Zarathian DNA have achieved natural fusion. I am, for lack of better terminology, pregnant with a hybrid child. Our child. Brennan's mind raced through implications, impossibilities, consequences. How? The science is complex, but essentially the catalyst fluid temporarily restructures cellular membranes. Cryosis's magnetic field creates quantum tunneling effects at the molecular level. And we both apparently carry recessive genetic sequences that allow for cross-species compatibility. The odds were astronomical, but here we are. She moved closer, her towering height somehow less intimidating now. This changes everything, Thaddeus, for both our peoples. If we can conceive naturally if hybrids are achievable, then every assumption about our fundamental incompatibility is wrong. Your people will see it as contamination, Brennan said slowly. Mine will see it as a security threat. Yes, which is why very few can know, not yet, not until we understand what this means. The door chimed. Zara's coloring flashed with annoyance, but she called entry. Dr. Kira rushed in, her silver blue scales rippling with urgent patterns. Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion, but you need to see this, now. She activated a holographic display. 2 ships appeared approaching Cryosis from different vectors. The Zarathian vessel is General Vex's flagship, Kira said, and the human ship is the UED-F Interceptor, Captain James Garrett commanding. Vex, Zara said, her voice hardening. Here, now. Arrival time estimated at 4 hours for Vex 6 for the human vessel. Kira looked between Zara and Brennan. Your Majesty, neither ship has announced themselves on standard channels. They're maintaining communication silence. Which means they don't want to be detected, Brennan said. Or they already know exactly what they'll find here. Zara's tactical mind reasserted itself. Kira, what's the status of the Genesis protocol? The escape vessel is fully operational. It can hold 4 passengers comfortably, but if Vex arrives, he'll detect any launch attempt. Not if we create a sufficient distraction. Zara turned to Brennan. You've seen the data your Captain Cross recovered. You know about that? I monitor everything in my outpost, Colonel. including intelligence operatives who think they're being subtle. Bring her here, and bring those files. It's time we stopped pretending to be enemies and started acting like allies. As Kira left to summon Cross, Zara and Brennan stood in the quiet of her chambers, the weight of unprecedented responsibility settling on both their shoulders. A child, Brennan said finally. Our child. I'm 58 years old. I'm human. You're an alien queen. This is insane. Yes, Zara agreed, but insanity seems to be our new normal. She placed one scaled hand over her abdomen where something unprecedented was beginning to grow. This child will be the first of its kind, neither fully human nor fully Zarathian, a bridge between worlds, or a target for everyone who wants the war to continue, which is why we must survive the next 4 hours. Zara's coloring hardened to battle crimson. And why we must get this child and the proof of what's achievable to safety before Vex arrives. The door opened again. Cross entered, data crystal in hand, her green eyes sharp with intelligence officer assessment. Your Majesty, she said carefully. The Colonel says you want to see what I found. Show me everything, Zara commanded, and then we plan how to survive this conspiracy together. As the three of them bent over the holographic displays examining evidence of betrayal from both their species, none of them noticed the medical alert that flashed briefly on Kira's abandoned scanner. Zara's vital signs were already changing. The hybrid was growing faster than any normal pregnancy, Zarathian or human. Her biology was adapting, but whether it could adapt quickly enough to sustain both her life and the unprecedented child's remained unknown. The clock was ticking in ways they didn't yet understand. The next 2 hours passed in intense planning. Zara, Brennan, and Cross analyzed every file Cross had recovered, cross-referencing with Zara's own intelligence on Vex's movements. The conspiracy was deeper than any of them had imagined, tentacles reaching into the highest levels of both governments. The Genesis vessel is our only option, Zara said, studying the escape route on the holographic display. It's designed for exactly this scenario, a small ship, heavily shielded, capable of reaching the secondary outpost in the neighboring system. Where you have loyal personnel, Brennan confirmed, where I have family, and the equipment to analyze what's happening too. She paused, her hand moving unconsciously to her abdomen. To us. Cross looked between them, noting the gesture, the change dynamic. Something had shifted between the alien queen and the retired colonel, something more than just a tactical alliance. But she was professional enough not to comment. The problem is the launch window, Cross said. Vex will be conducting active scans when he arrives. Any energy signature from a vessel launch will be immediately detected. Unless we blind his sensors, Zara said. Dr. Kira has been researching the frost behemoth's energy patterns. These creatures are drawn to specific frequencies. If we broadcast on that spectrum, we draw it to Vex's landing zone. Brennan completed. Create enough electromagnetic interference to mask our departure. Precisely, but someone would need to remain behind to trigger the broadcast at exactly the right moment. After we've launched, but before Vex's sensors recalibrate. The implication hung in the air. Someone would have to stay. Someone would almost certainly die. The door opened without chiming the override code that only one person possessed. Dr. Kara entered her coloring set in patterns of finality. I'll do it, she said without preamble. I'll stay and trigger the broadcast. No, Zara said flatly. I won't sacrifice you, cousin. It's not your choice, my queen. Kira's coloring shifted to patterns that carried the weight of irrevocable decision. The research data is coded to both my genetic signature and yours. Either of us can activate it at the secondary outpost, but only you can authorize its implementation across our government. You must survive. Kira, and you carry something far more important than research data now. Kira's eyes moved to Zara's abdomen. You carry proof that our species can coexist at the most fundamental level. That child is the future. My life is a small price for that future. The two Zarathians stared at each other, their coloring rippling with emotions humans couldn't fully read. Brennan recognized it anyway, the bond between family, the weight of sacrifice, the love that transcended even species loyalty. Finally, Zara inclined her head in acceptance, the gesture carrying more weight than any words. You honor our family, Kira, and our people. When this child is born, they will know your name, will know what you gave for their existence. Then I die well, Kira turned to Brennan. Protect her human. Protect them both, or I will haunt you across dimensions. Despite everything, Brennan smiled. Yes, ma'am. Kira moved to the medical equipment she'd brought, preparing the final scans Zora would need. As she worked, she spoke quietly. Your Majesty, I need to conduct one more examination before you leave, to assess the hybrid's position and establish baseline vitals for the physicians at the secondary outpost. Zara nodded, moving to the examination platform. Brennan started to leave to give them privacy, but Kira stopped him. Colonel, your presence may actually be helpful. The hybrid appears to respond to proximity to both genetic donors. Your bioelectric signature might calm it during the examination. Brennan entered hesitantly. Zara lay on the platform covered by a thin thermal drape. Even in this vulnerable position, she maintained regal bearing, spine straight, chin high, every inch a queen. Kira positioned the scanner with practiced efficiency. Your Majesty, for accurate imaging of the pelvic region and hybrid placement, I need you to assume the proper examination position. The clinical request hung in the air. Zara's coloring flashed through rapid patterns, crimson embarrassment, purple vulnerability, gold indignation. Her eyes found Brennan's as if daring him to react. He tried, he really did. But the sheer absurdity of the moment, an 8-foot alien queen being positioned for a medical examination of their unprecedented child, broke through his soldier's composure. A laugh escaped. Not cruel, just human. A release of tension that had been building since the Artemis exploded. Zara's head turned toward him with dangerous precision. You find this amusing, human? Your Majesty, Brennan said, fighting to control himself, but failing. In the last 72 hours, I've been blown up, frozen, chased by ice monsters, and discovered I'm going to be a father to an alien-human hybrid. And now I'm standing here while you get a prenatal exam for our kid. Yeah, it's a little absurd. Silence. Kira's coloring went completely still, uncertain if she should intervene. Then impossibly, Zara's angular features shifted. The corners of her mouth curved upward in something almost like a smile. You are, she said slowly, her harmonics carrying notes that might have been amusement, impossibly irreverent Thaddeus Brennan. It's a coping mechanism, Your Majesty. I am beginning to understand that about your species. Her coloring softened slightly. And perhaps there is wisdom in finding humor even in unprecedented circumstances. It is very human of you. We do what we can to stay sane. The tension broke. Zara complied with the examination, and Brennan politely turned away, giving her what dignity he could while remaining close enough for the hybrid to sense his presence. But something had shifted between them in that moment. The acknowledgement that they were in this together, royal protocol and species differences be damned. Fascinating, Kira murmured, studying the scanner readings. The hybrid has positioned itself near your primary heart, Your Majesty, almost as if seeking warmth and the rhythm of your pulse. Is that normal? Brennan asked. Nothing about this is normal, Colonel, but yes, it appears instinctively healthy. The child knows where to find comfort. She adjusted the scanner. However, the growth rate is concerning, already equivalent to 4 weeks of normal development, and it's only been 8 hours since conception. At this rate, how long until term? Zara asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty. Unknown. If the acceleration continues linearly, perhaps 4 standard months. But that's speculation. We're discovering the biology in real time. Kira completed the scans, downloaded the data to portable storage. This should give the physicians at the secondary outpost everything they need to monitor your condition. But Your Majesty, she hesitated. The biological strain is already significant. If the growth rate doesn't stabilize, you may face critical complications within 72 hours. Zara's coloring shifted to determined crimson. Then we ensure I reach proper medical care within 72 hours. How much time until Vex arrives? 93 minutes. Then we have 93 minutes to prepare for escape. Kira finalized the behemoth call protocols. Captain Cross prepped the Genesis vessel. Colonel Brennan gather any equipment or supplies we might need. As they moved to execute her orders, Zara remained on the examination platform for one more moment, her hand resting on her abdomen, where something unprecedented was growing. An impossible child, a bridge between worlds, a future that had seemed like a fantasy just hours ago. Now it was real, fragile, uncertain, but real. And she would do whatever necessary to ensure it survived. The Genesis vessel waited in its hidden hangar, sleek and organic, grown rather than built from living crystal technology. Brennan conducted final checks on the weapon systems, while Cross verified the navigation protocols. Zara stood near the entrance, watching her outpost personnel make preparations, knowing many of them wouldn't survive what was coming. Your Majesty, one of her officers approached, scales rippling with concern. General Vex's ship has entered final approach. 62 minutes to landing. Understood. All non-essential personnel to emergency shelters. Combat teams to defensive positions. Make it look like we're preparing to repel an attack. We are preparing to repel an attack, are we not? We're preparing to survive, Zara corrected. There's a difference. As the officer departed, Kira appeared at Zara's side. All systems ready. The behemoth call is programmed to activate on my command. The frequency will draw the creature directly to Vex's landing coordinates. And you, Zara asked quietly, are you ready? Kira's coloring shifted to peaceful blue. I've been ready since you first proposed this research, cousin. Since you dared to imagine a future where our species might coexist. If my death ensures that future has a chance. She touched the memorial crystal at Zara's throat, the one containing Kren's genetic code. Kren died for lies. I die for truth. I prefer my fate to his. Zara pulled her cousin into an embrace, a gesture of profound intimacy in Zarathian culture. They touched foreheads, their coloring synchronizing in patterns of familial love and farewell. Raise this child to know both worlds, sister, Kira whispered. Let them be living proof that the impossible simply means not yet achieved. When they separated, both had regained their composure, royal dignity, and scientific determination reasserting themselves. 48 minutes, Cross called from the communication station. Vex is entering final approach vector. No hailing attempts, no identification beacon. He's coming in hostile. Brennan joined Zara at the entrance to the hangar. The interceptor Biartish just entered high orbit. He's detected Vex's vessel and is taking a cautious position. Will he engage if Vex fires first? Garrett's old-school military. He won't start a fight with our cause, but he won't back down from one either. If Vex attacks him, Brennan trailed off, the implications clear. Then Vex gets his war, Zara finished grimly. Another conflict started by lies and manipulation. Not if we expose the truth first. Cross appeared with the data crystals containing all the evidence. The moment we clear the magnetic interference, I transmit everything to both governments simultaneously. Vex and Hendricks get exposed before they can control the narrative. Assuming we survive long enough to transmit, Brennan said. Zara's coloring hardened. We will survive, Colonel. We must. For our child and for the future of both our peoples. The phrase hung in the air, our child. The first time Zara had spoken it aloud to anyone other than Kira. Cross's eyes widened slightly, connecting implications, but she was professional enough to keep her questions to herself. 30 minutes, Kira announced from the broadcast station. Vex is beginning his landing sequence. Zara turned to her small group. Board the Genesis vessel. I'll join you in 10 minutes. There are final orders I must give to my personnel. Brennan hesitated. Your Majesty, I am still Empress of these people, Colonel. I will not abandon my post until the last possible moment. 10 minutes, I promise. Reluctantly, Brennan and Cross boarded the vessel. Through the viewport, they watched Zara move through her outpost, speaking to her warriors, touching shoulders in gestures of encouragement and farewell. A queen to the end. On the bridge of vengeance of Kren, General Vex studied the tactical display with satisfaction. The outpost appeared to be preparing defensive positions exactly as he'd anticipated. Zara was predictable in her adherence to military protocol. Landing struts contact in 5 minutes, his tactical officer reported. Excellent. Boarding teams ready. Yes, General, 40 warriors fully armed. They await your command. Vex's coloring pulsed with anticipation. Soon Zara would be dead killed by the humans she'd foolishly trusted. The war would restart with righteous fury, and Vex would claim leadership of a species purified of weakness. General, another officer interrupted. The human vessel in orbit, the interceptor, is hailing us. Only ignore it, Vex commanded. We have no communication with humans until after we've secured the outpost. What Vex didn't know was that in a hidden chamber deep within the outpost, Dr. Kira was making final preparations for a broadcast that would change everything. Zara returned to the Genesis hangar with 2 minutes to spare. Her coloring showed strain, now the pregnancy taking its toll despite her attempts to hide it. Brennan met her at the vessel's entrance, offering his hand to help her aboard. She took it without hesitation, and the gesture felt more intimate than any words. "Vex is landing," Cross reported from the pilot's position. "Kira, are you in position?" "Affirmative." Kira's voice came through the comm. "Behemoth call ready. I'm sealing the broadcast chamber now. Once I activate the sequence, I won't be able to leave. The electromagnetic pulse will fuse the door mechanisms." "Kira," Zara started, but her cousin cut her off. "No farewells, my queen. Just promise me you'll build the future we dreamed of." "I promise," Zara said, her voice thick with harmonics of grief. "On Kren's memory in my throne, I promise." "Then I am content." Activating Behemoth call in 3, 2, 1. The outpost communication array flared to life, broadcasting on frequencies that existed at the edge of perception. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ice itself seemed to move. The frost behemoth rose from the frozen plain 2 kilometers away, drawn by irresistible frequencies. 30 feet of ancient rage and semi-solid ice, it turned toward Vex's landing ship with terrible purpose. "Launch now," Kira commanded through the comm. While his sensors are disrupted, Zara gripped the Genesis vessel's controls. The hangar doors above slid open, revealing chaos as the behemoth began its assault on Vex's ship. Warriors scrambled, weapons fire lighting up the blizzard. "May the ancestors guide you, Kira," Zara whispered. Then she engaged the engines. The Genesis vessel rose silently from its hidden dock anti-gravity systems, engaging with barely a whisper. It ascended into the storm using the weather and the behemoth's energy signature to mask its departure. On Vex's bridge, alarms shrieked. "Massive energy signature approaching. It's a behemoth." Vex's coloring flashed crimson. "All weapons fire, kill it before." The creature struck. A limb of glacial force crashed into the ship's starboard side, crumpling advanced armor like paper. The vessel rocked violently, throwing warriors to the deck. In the chaos, no one noticed the small ship escaping into the upper atmosphere, except Captain Garrett watching from orbit on the interceptor. "Sir," his tactical officer said, "small vessel launching from the outpost. Zarathian configuration, and detecting human life signs aboard." Garrett studied the readout, his tactical mind piecing together possibilities. A Zarathian ship with humans aboard fleeing during a behemoth attack on what appeared to be General Vex's vessel. "Hold position," he ordered. "Do not engage, but keep tracking that ship. And somebody get me a secure channel to UEDF command. Something very strange is happening here." The Genesis vessel broke through the upper atmosphere, cryosis falling away below. Cross monitored sensors watching the battle unfold on their aft displays. "Vex's ship is taking heavy damage," she reported. "The behemoth is relentless, but his weapons are starting to have effect. He might drive it off soon." "How long until we can transmit?" Zara asked, one hand on the controls, the other unconsciously resting on her abdomen. 20 seconds to clear the magnetic field interference." Those 20 seconds felt like an eternity. Brennan watched the tactical display, seeing Vex's ship gradually gaining the upper hand against the behemoth, seeing the creature begin to retreat. "Transmission range in 5, 4, 3. A massive explosion registered on the sensors. The outpost, Kira's outpost, Zara's research facility, the birthplace of hybrid hope, erupted in a sphere of superheated plasma. Vex had fired an orbital strike. "No!" Zara's anguish carried harmonics that made the vessel's hull resonate. Her coloring went ash gray, the Zarathian equivalent of profound grief. "Kira," she whispered. "Cousin, sister, friend." Brennan's hand found hers, human flesh against alien scales. "She died saving us, saving the future. That means something. It means everything." Zara said, her voice thick with sorrow. "And nothing. She's still gone." "Transmission range achieved," Cross announced quietly, giving them a moment. "Ready to send on your command, Your Majesty." Zara straightened, forcing her grief into a locked compartment to be dealt with later. Right now, she was a queen with responsibilities that transcended personal loss. "Send everything," she commanded. "All evidence, all research data, all proof of the conspiracy. To both UEDF Command and the Zarathian High Council. Simultaneously." Cross's fingers flew across the controls. "Transmitting now." Across space, encrypted data streams raced toward Earth and the Zarathian homeworld. Evidence of sabotage, proof of conspiracy, records of illegal executions, financial transactions showing war profiteering, and most explosive of all, the hybrid research data showing that the impossible was achievable, that two species thought to be fundamentally incompatible could create life together. On Earth, klaxons blared in UEDF command as the data flooded in. On the Zarathian homeworld, the High Council convened an emergency session as the transmissions were verified. Both governments would never be the same. But on the Genesis vessel, more immediate concerns took precedence. Vex is pursuing, Cross said urgently. His ship's damaged, but he's locked weapons on us. He's following our trajectory. Evasive, Zara commanded, her tactical instincts overriding her grief. Maximum burn to jump coordinates. The small vessel jinked through space, its organic hull groaning under stress it wasn't designed to handle. Vex's weapons fire lit up the void around them. Plasma burst missing by meters. Jump in 40 seconds. Cross counted down. 35, 30. More alarms. Brennan saw it on the biomonitor first. Zara, your vitals, something's wrong. The Empress had gone rigid in her seat, coloring flashing through chaotic patterns of crimson and purple and shades that shouldn't exist. She gasped, doubling over. The hybrid she managed through evident pain. The stress, the acceleration, it's growing too fast. I can feel. She didn't finish. Her coloring went completely white, the Zarathian equivalent of shock or system failure. Medical emergency, Brennan shouted, unbuckling, despite the vessel's violent maneuvering. Cross, can you fly this thing solo? I'll have to get her stabilized. Brennan moved to Zara, his hands finding hers. He'd done field medicine in a dozen war zones, but never on an 8-foot alien queen pregnant with his unprecedented child. Her pulse raced under his fingers, erratic and dangerous. 20 seconds to jump, Cross called out, her voice tight with stress. Vex is still pursuing. If we don't jump now, we're dead. Brennan looked down at Zara, her eyes unfocused, coloring flickering like a dying light. He thought of his life, all 58 years of it. The wars, the losses, the regrets. And somehow, impossibly, this moment felt like the culmination of everything. He thought about the choice facing them. Jump now with Zara in medical crisis, risking the acceleration killing her in the hybrid. Or delay, try to stabilize her and let Vex catch them. Zara, he said, knowing she probably couldn't hear him. Your Majesty, you need to hold on just a little longer. You're an empress, remember. You don't get to die on me. 10 seconds, Cross announced. 9, 8. Brennan made his decision. Cross alter jump coordinates. Reduce acceleration by 40%. Longer route, gentler transition. That'll let Vex follow us, Cross protested. I don't care. Do it. 5 seconds. Zara's eyes suddenly focused, finding his. You dare countermand. You're queen. Yeah, Brennan said, his face set in stubborn lines. Court-martial me later, after you're alive, to do it. Despite everything, despite the pain and danger, Zara's features shifted into something almost like a smile. You are impossible. 3, 2, 1. The Genesis vessel tore a hole in space-time and leaped across the void. The gentler jump parameters meant the acceleration was survivable, but it also meant their trajectory was traceable. Behind them, Vex's damaged ship locked onto their vector and began pursuit. But Zara didn't die. Her coloring slowly returned, stabilizing to that deep purple Brennan had learned meant emotional depth. Her eyes met his, filled with something he couldn't quite identify, but felt nonetheless. You defied me, she said weakly. Risked everything. For me. For you, for the baby, for the future. Brennan's hand remained on hers. Some things are worth the risk, Your Majesty. You are, Zara said softly, her harmonics carrying notes he'd never heard before. The most impossible human in existence, Thaddeus Brennan. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. Cross's voice interrupted the moment. We've got a new problem. That course change bought us time, but Vex is still following. And his weapons range is better than I thought. He'll be in firing position in 20 minutes. Can we make it to the secondary outpost first? Zara asked, forcing herself upright despite her weakened state. It'll be close, very close. Brennan helped Zara into a proper seat, securing the safety restraints. Through the viewport, the gas giant that hosted the secondary outpost moon was visible, a swirling mass of storms and impossible colors. That's where we're going, Zara said, following his gaze. My family's research station, hidden in the caves of the third moon. They have the medical facilities to save us, both of us, and the personnel to analyze what's happening to you, Brennan added, to figure out how to stabilize the pregnancy. If we survive the next 20 minutes. Cross pushed the engines to maximum, the Genesis vessel straining to reach safety before Vex's weapons found their mark. Behind them, the damaged but determined flagship of a traitor general closed the distance meter by meter. The race for survival had entered its final phase. The Genesis vessel screamed through space at velocities that made its organic hull groan in protest. Through the viewport, the gas giant's third moon grew larger, a pockmarked sphere of gray rock and ice, unremarkable, except for the life-saving facilities hidden in its depths. 15 minutes to weapons range, Cross reported, her knuckles white on the controls. 10 minutes to the moon, it's going to be extremely close. Zara sat rigidly in her seat, coloring shifting between determination and distress. The pregnancy was taking its toll, visible in the way her scales had dulled slightly, in the tremor in her hands when she thought no one was looking. Brennan noticed. He always noticed. Hang on, Hidam, he said quietly, his hand finding hers again. We're almost there. I can feel it growing, Zara whispered, her harmonics carrying frequencies of wonder and fear. Every minute it develops more. It's beautiful and terrifying. And that's parenthood in general, from what I understand. Despite everything, she managed a smile. You've never had children before. Never found the right person. Never had the time. And then I got too old and figured it wasn't in the cards for me. He looked at their joined hands, human and alien, impossible and real. Shows what I know. The universe has a strange sense of timing. Or humor. I'm still not sure which. A proximity alarm shrieked. Cross swore something Brennan hadn't heard her do before. Vex's firing brace, plasma bursts streaked past the Genesis vessel, one close enough that the shields flared with the absorbed energy. The ship rocked, systems protesting. Return fire, Cross asked. Negative, Zara commanded. We can't outgun a flagship. All power to shields and engines. We just need to survive long enough to reach the moon. Another volley. This one struck true and the ship lurched violently. Sparks flew from a control panel as secondary systems overloaded. Shields at 60%, Cross reported grimly. One more hit like that and we're in trouble. 5 minutes to the moon, Brennan called out, watching the tactical display. The outpost has defensive systems, right? They'll provide cover fire once we're in range. Yes, but they're designed for research protection, not military engagement. Zara gripped her armrests as another impact rocked the ship. We're asking scientists to hold off a flagship. Better than nothing. 4 minutes, 3. Vex's weapons fire growing more accurate as the range decreased. The Genesis vessel's shields failing meter by meter. 2 minutes, Cross said. Come on, come on! Then salvation. The moon's surface installations detected their approach and opened fire. Defensive lasers designed to clear orbital debris and deter pirates lanced out toward Vex's pursuing ship. It wasn't enough to seriously damage a military vessel, but it was enough to make Vex choose between continuing pursuit and protecting his already damaged ship. He chose survival, breaking off the attack and retreating to a safe distance. He's pulling back, Cross shouted triumphantly. We made it. The Genesis vessel dove toward the moon's surface, guided by automated landing protocols. Hidden hangar doors opened in what appeared to be a crater wall, revealing the concealed facility beneath. They touched down with a gentle bump that belied the violence of the last hour. The hangar sealed above them, atmosphere flooding back and artificial gravity engaging. For a moment, none of them moved. They'd survived. Against astronomical odds, with a traitor in pursuit and an impossible pregnancy straining Zara's biology, they'd survived. Then Zara tried to stand and collapsed. Brennan caught her before she hit the deck, her 8-foot frame suddenly dead weight in his arms. Medical. We need medical assistance now. The hangar doors burst open. Zarathian medical personnel rushed in, led by an elderly female with silver scales that indicated advanced age and deep wisdom. Her eyes widened at the sight of Empress Zara unconscious in a human's arms. Dr. Varesh, I presume, Brennan said, remembering the name Zara had mentioned. She's pregnant, hybrid, human Zarathian, growing too fast. Her biology can't keep up. To Varesh's credit, she barely hesitated, despite the unprecedented nature of his words. Get her to medical immediately. And you human, you're the genetic donor. Yes. Then you come too. I may need samples, data, anything to understand what's happening inside her. They rushed Zara through corridors carved from the moon's bedrock, lined with the same bioluminescent technology that powered all Zarathian facilities. The medical center was state-of-the-art equipment, humming with organic power. Varesh worked with focused intensity scanners playing over Zara's body, while younger physicians prepared treatments Brennan couldn't begin to understand. The hybrid is viable, Varesh announced after what felt like an eternity, but it's consuming her biological resources at an unsustainable rate, multiple organs showing stress. She's approaching cascade failure. Can you save her? Brennan demanded. Varesh's ancient eyes met his, and Brennan saw in them the weight of impossible decisions. I can save one of them, not both. The biological strain is too severe. You must choose, Colonel Brennan, the Empress or the hybrid. I cannot preserve both. The room seemed to contract around him. Brennan stared at Zara's unconscious form, at the impossible woman who had become his ally, his companion, something more than he had words for. And he thought of the child growing inside her, the first of its kind, the bridge between species. There has to be another way. There isn't. Her biology is rejecting the hybrid's accelerated growth. I can arrest the growth and save her, but the hybrid will die. Or I can support the hybrid's development, but she will not survive the strain. You must choose. Now. Brennan's mind raced, pulling from decades of impossible situations where there were no good options, only less terrible ones. What if you slowed the growth gradually? Not stopped it, just bought time for her body to adapt. Varesh's coloring shifted, surprise perhaps. The only way to slow it would be to induce a form of controlled stasis. But we don't have equipment calibrated for hybrid biology. The risk of damaging the fetus is better than certainty. Brennan finished. Do it. Induce stasis. Buy her time to adapt. And if it doesn't work, he paused, his face showing every one of his 58 years. If it doesn't work, you save Zara. The child would want its mother to live. Varesh studied him for a long moment, then inclined her head in respect. You honor both of them with that choice. We will, Trin. The next hours blurred into a nightmare of medical procedures and desperate improvisation. Varesh and her team worked miracles, combining Zarathian medical knowledge with the hybrid research data that had cost Kira her life. They induced a modified stasis field around the developing hybrid, not stopping its growth, but slowing it to a rate Zara's biology might sustain. They supplemented her failing organs with external support systems. They pumped her full of nutrients and compounds designed to help her body adapt to the unprecedented strain. And slowly, impossibly, it worked. Zara's vital signs stabilized. The hybrid's growth rate decreased to something approaching sustainable levels. The crisis passed, replaced by cautious optimism and the understanding that they just performed xenobiology's equivalent of emergency surgery without an instruction manual. Brennan sat beside Zara's medical platform through all of it, holding her scaled hand, watching the monitors like they held the secrets of the universe. Cross worked in the communications center, coordinating with both governments as the political aftermath of their revelations cascaded across two species. On Earth, Colonel Hendricks had been arrested along with 17 other conspirators. On the Zarathian homeworld, the High Council had purged Vex's faction, detaining over 40 officers who'd supported his war ambitions. The peace was holding, barely but holding. On the third day, Zara's eyes opened. Brennan had been dozing in the chair beside her, exhausted beyond measure. He jerked awake at the soft sound of her breathing changing, found those golden eyes watching him with returning awareness. Thaddeus, she said, her voice weak but clear. The child alive. You both are. Barely but alive. Her coloring shifted through patterns, relief and joy mixing with residual pain. Kira, I'm sorry, the outpost was destroyed. Vex's final strike. Zara closed her eyes, grief washing over her features. But when she opened them again, determination had returned. She died well, for a purpose that mattered. I will honor that sacrifice. Both our governments received the transmissions, Brennan said. All the evidence, all the research. The conspiracies are being dismantled on both sides. and the revelation of our child, creating exactly the political chaos you'd expect. Some are calling it an abomination. Others are calling it a miracle. Most are just confused. Zara attempted a smile, a reasonable response to the unprecedented. Dr. Varesh entered her coloring rippling with professional satisfaction. Your Majesty, welcome back. The crisis has passed. Both you and the hybrid are stable, though you'll need extensive monitoring for the duration of the pregnancy. How long until term? Unknown. This is unprecedented biology. But based on current projections and assuming the stasis modifications continue working approximately 4 standard months, assuming no further complications. 4 months to prepare 2 species for a future neither imagined achievable. Zara mused. It will have to be enough. Over the next weeks, as Zara recovered her strength and the hybrid continued its slow but steady development, the political landscape shifted. The evidence Cross had transmitted had exposed the conspiracy in brutal detail, and both governments were forced to confront the rot within their own ranks. But more than that, the hybrid research data and the living proof growing in Empress Zara had shattered assumptions about what was possible between their species. Captain James Garrett of the Interceptor had transmitted his own report confirming he'd witnessed Vex's unprovoked attack and the orbital bombardment of the outpost. His testimony, combined with the recovered data, painted a clear picture. Not all humans wanted war with the Zarathians, and not all Zarathians wanted war with humans. The hardliners on both sides found themselves increasingly isolated. 6 weeks after their arrival at the secondary outpost, a joint commission convened via subspace communication. Representatives from both governments gathered in virtual conference, human and Zarathian delegates appearing side by side in holographic display. Empress Zara attended from the medical facility, her pregnancy now visibly evident even to human eyes. Her abdomen showed a pronounced swell. Her coloring had taken on subtle new patterns, and she moved with the careful deliberation of someone whose body was performing unprecedented biological feats. Beside her holographic image stood Colonel Thaddeus Brennan, officially designated as human liaison to the hybrid research program, though everyone knew his role was more personal than that. General Caldwell Patterson addressed the assembly from Earth's delegation. The evidence presented is clear and verified. Elements within both our governments conspired to restart hostilities for personal gain. These conspirators have been arrested and will face justice according to our respective legal systems. Elder Vorath spoke for the Zarathian High Council. His ancient scales pale, but his voice firm. The hybrid research, while controversial, has proven its potential for facilitating cooperation rather than conflict. The Council votes to continue the program under strict oversight and ethical guidelines. UEDF Command concurs, Patterson added. Additionally, we propose formal designation of Cryosis as joint scientific territory with equal human and Zarathian access for further compatibility research. The vote was called. The measure passed not unanimously, but with sufficient support to create binding policy across both governments. As the formal session concluded, Patterson requested a private channel to Brennan. Thad, the general said quietly, his holographic form leaning forward. You know, this is just the beginning. There are still factions on both sides who see that child as a threat to everything they believe in. I know Caldwell, Brennan replied, but there are also people who see it as hope, as proof we don't have to be enemies forever. You really believe that, after everything you've seen, everything you've lost? Brennan glanced at Zara's holographic form at the evidence of impossible life growing within her. Yeah, I do. Maybe I'm getting soft in my old age, but I believe it. Because the alternative, going back to war, to killing each other over fears and lies, that's not a future I want any part of. Patterson smiled, the expression tired but genuine. Then I hope you're right, old friend, for all our sakes. The transmission ended, leaving Brennan alone in the small communications room. Through the viewport, he could see the gas giant rising over the moon's horizon, its swirling storms painting the sky in colors Earth had never known. Beautiful, alien, and somehow increasingly familiar. Like the woman carrying his child. But their moment of relative peace was about to end, because General Vex's flagship damaged, but his determination unbroken, had not fled the system. He'd simply retreated to plan his final gambit. If he couldn't have the war he wanted, he'd settle for revenge. And there was only one target that mattered. The attack came without warning. Vex's flagship, repaired enough to make one final strike, appeared in orbit, above the moon. The defensive systems activated immediately, but they were designed for small-scale threats, not military assault. All personnel to emergency stations. The alarm rang through the facility. We are under attack. This is not a drill. Brennan was in the medical bay with Zara when the first impacts hit. The moon shook dust raining from the ceiling as Vex's weapons found their mark. He's insane, Cross said, rushing in from the command center. He's conducting a direct assault on a civilian research facility. This is a war crime. He's already committed war crimes, Zara said, forcing herself upright despite Varesh's protests. One more won't matter to him. Where's his ship positioned? Low orbit. He's launching boarding pods. Your Majesty, he's coming here personally. For you. Zara's coloring hardened to battle crimson. Then let him come. I'm tired of running. You're 7 weeks pregnant and barely recovered from medical crisis, Brennan said flatly. You can't fight. Watch me. Your Majesty, Varesh began. I am Empress of the Zarathian people. Zara interrupted, her voice carrying royal authority that transcended her weakened physical state. I do not cower while my enemies attack my people. Bring me my armor and my weapons. Now. Brennan recognized that tone. He'd heard it in the command center during the behemoth attack, seen it in her eyes when she'd made the impossible decisions. This wasn't bravado. This was a queen who'd made her choice. Then I fight beside you, he said simply. Thaddeus, I defied you once to save your life. I'll defy you again if I have to. We're in this together, you and me and that impossible kid you're carrying. So if you fight, I fight. That's not negotiable. Their eyes met human blue and alien gold, and something passed between them that went beyond words. Understanding, partnership, something deeper that neither had time to examine. Very well, Colonel, Zara said finally. We fight together. The facility's small security force scientists and researchers pressed into emergency combat roles, established defensive positions at the main access points. But they were badly outnumbered. Vex had brought 40 elite warriors veterans of the war fanatics loyal to their general's vision of Zarathian purity. Brennan organized the defense with Cross's help, using his decades of tactical experience to position their limited forces for maximum effect. Zara, despite Varesh's continued protests, donned her armor and took command of the Zarathian defenders. The first boarding pod struck the moon's surface directly above the medical wing. Shaped charges blew through meters of rock, and Vex's warriors poured into the facility. The battle was brutal in close quarters. Plasma fire lit up corridors carved from stone. Human bullets sparked against Zarathian scales. Warriors fell on both sides as the defense struggled to contain the assault. Through it all, Zara fought with controlled fury, her movements economical despite her condition. She wasn't the front-line warrior she'd been during the behemoth attack, couldn't risk the accelerations and impacts that combat demanded. But her tactical mind was as sharp as ever, directing defenders, coordinating fields of fire, turning the facility's narrow corridors into killing zones. Brennan stayed close, covering her flanks, using his human scale size to maneuver through spaces the larger Zarathians couldn't navigate as quickly. They fought like they'd been partners for years instead of weeks, each anticipating the other's movements, covering each other's vulnerabilities. But Vex's warriors were pressing forward, meter by bloody meter, driving toward the medical center, where the evidence of hybrid research and the living proof of its success waited. Fall back to the secondary junction, Zara commanded. Defensive formation Kren 3, and the defenders retreated in good order, establishing a new line. But they all knew it was only delaying the inevitable. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of space to retreat into. Then Vex himself appeared. The general strode through the smoke and destruction like a force of nature, his emerald scales bearing new scars from the behemoth encounter, but his presence undiminished. He carried a ceremonial blade that glowed with contained energy, an ancient weapon passed down through generations of Zarathian military leaders. Zara, his voice boomed, carrying subharmonics that made the stone walls vibrate. Face me, face justice for your betrayal of everything our people stand for. The fighting paused as warriors on both sides recognized the challenge. In Zarathian military tradition, single combat between commanders could determine the outcome of a conflict. It was ancient law predating their spaceflight, rooted in honor and blood. Zara stepped forward, her plasma spear materializing in her hands. I will face you, Vex, but know this Kren died for your lives, not for honor. His blood is on your hands, not mine. Lies! Vex's coloring flashed with fury. I gave Kren the truth that humans were weak, treacherous, planning to exterminate us. Everything I told him was vindicated by their attacks. Attacks you provoked, incidents you staged, you murdered our own people and blamed humans to justify your war. Zara's voice carried royal authority. You are a traitor to our species, Vex, and I will end your treachery here. Vex roared and charged. His blade swept toward Zara's neck with killing force. But Zara was ready. Despite her pregnancy, despite weeks of medical crisis, she was still a warrior queen trained from birth in combat. She rolled beneath the strike, her spear lashing out to catch Vex behind the knee. He stumbled, but didn't fall, spinning to face her again. They circled each other, predators seeking advantage. You're slow, Vex taunted. Weak, contaminated by that abomination you carry. I'm a mother protecting her child, Zara replied. That makes me more dangerous than you can imagine. They clashed again, blade against spear, emerald scales against burgundy. Vex was stronger, faster, unencumbered by pregnancy. But Zara was smarter, more precise, fighting with the focus of someone who had everything to lose. Brennan watched from the defensive line, his rifle trained on Vex, but unable to fire without violating the combat protocols. If he interfered, Zara's warriors would see it as dishonor. The fragile alliance would shatter. But every instinct screamed at him to act, to protect her, to end Vex before the general's blade found its mark. The fight continued, both combatants taking wounds. Vex's blade scored a line across Zara's arm, drawing dark blood. Her spear found his shoulder, burning through armor. Then Vex made his mistake. He feinted high and struck low, aiming for Zara's abdomen, for the hybrid growing within her. Zara saw it coming, had been waiting for exactly this move, knowing Vex's hatred would make him target the child. She let him commit to the strike, then twisted aside at the last instant. Vex's blade passed through the space where she'd been, leaving him overextended and off balance, and Zara drove her plasma spear through his chest. Vex staggered, golden eyes wide with shock. His blade clattered to the stone floor. He looked down at the weapon impaling him, then up at Zara's face. You doom us all, he whispered, his subharmonics fading, diluting our blood, our heritage. No, Zara said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. I save us, from you, from fear, from a past that offers only death. The future requires change, Vex, and change requires courage you never had. She twisted the spear. Vex collapsed, his coloring fading to gray as his life fled. The general who had orchestrated so much death, who had manipulated a war and murdered his own people, died in the tunnels of a moon he'd come to destroy. Died knowing he'd failed. His warriors stood frozen, their world shattered, their general defeated, their cause revealed as lies. One by one they lowered their weapons in surrender. Zara pulled her spear free and turned to face her people and the humans who'd fought beside them. Blood ran down her arm from Vex's strike, but her bearing remained regal. This war is over, she declared. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more death for the profit of those who send others to fight. We build something new, something better. Or we die as Vex died alone, afraid, clinging to a past that cannot save us. The silence that followed was absolute. Then slowly Zara's warriors began touching their fists to their chests, the Zarathian salute of absolute respect. One by one, even Vex's former soldiers joined them, recognizing authority and truth when they heard it. Brennan lowered his rifle, relief flooding through him. She'd won. Not just the fight, but the larger battle. The battle for the future. Then Zara swayed. Brennan was moving before she fell, catching her as her legs gave out. The wound on her arm was superficial, but the strain of combat on her already stressed biology had pushed her past her limits. Medical, he shouted. Dr. Varesh, now. They rushed Zara back to the medical center, Varesh and her team working frantically. The hybrid had survived the combat stress, but barely. Zara's biology was approaching cascade failure again, the temporary improvements from the stasis treatment overwhelmed by physical trauma. For the second time in weeks, Brennan sat beside her while physicians fought to save two lives in one body. Hours passed, then days. On the fifth day, Zara woke again, and this time Varesh had better news. The hybrid has stabilized, the elderly physician reported, her coloring showing cautious optimism. More than that, Your Majesty's biology has adapted. The stasis modifications combined with the stress response from combat triggered accelerated biological accommodation. Your body is now sustaining the hybrid without external support. I'm going to survive this, Zara asked, her voice still weak but carrying hope. You're going to survive this. Both of you. Varesh pulled up a holographic scan. The hybrid is developing normally now, well as normally as unprecedented can be. Current projections suggest delivery in approximately 3 months. Barring complications, you should carry to term without further crises. Zara's hand moved to her abdomen, now visibly rounded with pregnancy. Tears, a Zarathian equivalent crystalline and opalescent, gathered in her eyes. Our child will live, she whispered. Our child will live. Brennan confirmed, his own eyes suspiciously bright, and changed 2 worlds in the process. Over the following weeks, as Zara recovered and the pregnancy progressed, the galaxy itself began to change. News of the hybrid, confirmed by both governments, witnessed by Captain Garrett and the Interceptor crew, spread across both species' territories. The reactions were as varied as expected: revulsion from hardliners, fascination from scientists, fear from conservatives, hope from progressives, confusion from most everyone else. But the conspiracy's exposure had damaged the credibility of those who opposed integration. Vex and Hendricks had been proven liars and traitors. Their arguments against cooperation now carried the stain of their crimes. And slowly, inevitably, the idea of human Zarathian hybrids shifted from unthinkable to merely controversial to eventually possible. 3 months after Vex's death, Empress Zara went into labor. The birthing chamber was filled with both human and Zarathian medical personnel species working together with unprecedented cooperation. Brennan stood beside Zara, holding her hand despite the risk of her crushing it during contractions. You know, Zara said between contractions, her coloring shifting through chaotic patterns, when I first saw you on Cryosis, I planned your execution in 17 different ways. I remember, very intimidating. And now here we are, bringing a child into the universe together. Life takes strange turns. Life takes impossible turns. But we're managing anyway. Another contraction hit. Zara's grip tightened until Brennan felt bones grinding together, but he didn't cry out. This was her moment, her trial. He was just honored to be present. Crowning, as Dr. Varesh announced, Your Majesty, on the next contraction, push with everything you have. Zara nodded, gathered herself, and when the contraction came, she pushed. Her coloring flashed through every shade simultaneously, her harmonics creating sounds that made the air itself vibrate. And then, impossibly miraculously, the child emerged. The room fell silent. Human and Zarathian medical staff stared at the infant Varesh, held at the being that should not exist. The child was small, perhaps 5 pounds smaller than typical Zarathian newborns, but larger than human. Its skin was smooth, but with subtle patterns of scales across the shoulders and arms, burgundy like its mother's. Fine dark hair covered its scalp, but with copper highlights that caught the light. Its eyes, when they opened, were blue like its father's, but with vertical pupils like its mother's. Neither human nor Zarathian. Both and neither. Something entirely new. The child drew breath and cried the sound, carrying harmonics no human infant could produce, but lacking the full complexity of Zarathian communication. A voice between worlds. A voice of the future. A daughter, Varesh announced, her ancient voice thick with emotion. You have a daughter, Your Majesty. Zara reached out with trembling hands, and Varesh placed the child in her mother's arms. The infant quieted immediately, responding to the presence of the being who had carried her through so much. Hello, little one, Zara whispered, her coloring shifting to patterns Brennan had never seen before, patterns of pure maternal love that transcended species. You are so small, so fragile, so impossibly perfect. Brennan looked down at his daughter, at the child he'd never planned to have conceived under conditions that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Tears ran down his weathered face, cutting tracks through 3 months of accumulated worry. What do we call her? He asked. Zara thought for a moment, then smiled. Aurora, for the ship that brought you to me, for the light that appears after the longest night, for the dawn of a new age. Aurora Brennan Zara, Brennan said, testing the name on his tongue. First of her kind, bridge between worlds, proof that the impossible just means not yet achieved. Yes, Zara agreed, her harmonics carrying notes of fierce pride and protective love. All of that and more. The galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after Aurora's birth, the permanent Joint Research Station opened on Cryosses, rebuilt where Zara's original outpost had stood. It was larger now, designed to accommodate both species in equal measure, with facilities for the hybrid research that had cost so much to establish. A memorial stood at the entrance, listing the names of those who had died for this future. Dr. Kira's name was carved largest, her sacrifice remembered and honored by both species. 16 more catalyst-compatible pairs had been identified across both populations. 3 had volunteered for the pregnancy process, undergoing it in controlled conditions, with the full medical knowledge gained from Zara's experience. All 3 had been successful. The hybrid population was growing slowly but steadily, and with each birth, the idea of 2 species coexisting became less theoretical and more real. Political resistance remained strong in conservative factions of both governments, but the sight of hybrid children thriving, healthy, happy, and showing characteristics of both parent species was slowly changing minds. It was harder to hate what you could see was simply life trying to survive. Thaddeus Brennan, now 59, stood on the observation deck of the Cryosses station, watching the reconstruction efforts below. He'd settled into an unexpected role as diplomatic liaison, and more importantly, as a father learning to navigate parenting across species barriers. Aurora was in the nursery, surrounded by both human and Zarathian caregivers who monitored her development with scientific fascination and genuine affection. At 6 months old, she was developing faster than human children, but slower than Zarathian, following her own unique timeline that combined traits of both species. She'd said her first word last week, a hybrid sound that carried meaning in both languages, simultaneously understood perfectly by her human father and Zarathian mother, but representing something new, something neither species had before, the beginning of a true hybrid culture. Zara joined him at the viewport, her presence announced by the soft chiming of the crystals in her hair. She'd returned to her full regal bearing after Aurora's birth, though Brennan noticed the changes pregnancy had wrought. Her scales carried new patterns, now subtle variations that marked her as the first Zarathian to bear a hybrid child. Marks of honor among her people. Captain Cross just transmitted from Earth, Zara said. The Security Council voted to formalize the alliance. Full cooperation on science, trade, and mutual defense. The Zarathian High Council passed similar measures this morning. It's official. After 4 years of fragile peace, we're actually allies now. Brennan smiled, the expression carving new lines in his weathered face. Our daughter will grow up in a very different galaxy than the one we fought in. That was always the hope. Zara's hand found his on the railing scales, warm against skin. Do you ever regret it, how your life turned out? I plan to retire in Montana, drink whiskey, watch snowfall, maybe fish a little. That sounds peaceful. It sounds boring. Brennan turned to face her fully, his blue eyes meeting her golden ones. You know what I learned, Zara? Impossible things happen every day. Every single day, somewhere in the universe, something that shouldn't be possible becomes real. The trick is being brave enough to let them happen, to embrace them instead of fighting them. Profound words from an old soldier. I'm 59, not dead yet. Zara's laughter carried harmonics that resonated in his chest, a sound he'd grown to love over the past months. No, very much alive, and very much part of something larger than either of us imagined. In the nursery below, Aurora began to cry, her hybrid voice carrying notes no single species could produce, a sound unique in the galaxy. Both parents turned toward it, immediately, instinct overriding everything else. Our daughter needs us, Zara said. She's going to change the world, Brennan replied. She already has. Together, human and Zarathian soldier and queen father and mother, they walked toward the nursery, toward their impossible daughter, toward a future neither species had believed achievable. Behind them, through the viewport, the twin moons of Cryosses rose over the frozen landscape where this had all begun. 2 worlds separate but sharing the same sky. Different but capable of coexistence. Different but no longer enemies. The blizzard had passed. Dawn was breaking across a galaxy, learning that survival sometimes required the unprecedented. Required becoming something new. Something better. Something that honored both the past and the future, the memory of those lost, and the hope of those yet to be born. Aurora stopped crying as her parents entered the nursery. She looked up at them with eyes that carried her father's color and her mother's shape, and smiled with a face that belonged to no single species but to the future of both. The impossible had been achieved, and it was only the beginning. 1 year after Aurora's birth, the first integrated school opened on Cryosis Station, designed to educate hybrid children alongside human and Zarathian youth. The building itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human architectural sensibilities blended with Zarathian organic technology, creating spaces that accommodated all three groups comfortably. The dedication ceremony drew representatives from both governments, military officials, who had once faced each other as enemies, now standing side by side as allies. News feeds broadcast the event across both civilizations, billions watching as history unfolded. Empress Zara stood at the podium, Aurora in her arms. The child wore clothing designed specifically for her unique physiology, human cotton blended with Zarathian thermal fibers, comfort meeting necessity. "My daughter," Zara said, her voice transmitted across space and species barriers, "will never know the hatred that nearly destroyed both our peoples. She will grow up with friends of every kind, learning that differences are strength, not weakness. Learning that what we can build together is greater than anything we could achieve apart." She paused, her coloring shifting to patterns of solemn remembrance. "This future cost us much. Dr. Kira, who died to ensure we could reach safety. General Kren manipulated into a war he didn't understand. Dr. Helena Bradford, who preserved the truth even as her ship burned. Captain and crew of countless vessels on both sides who believed they fought for their people's survival." Her harmonics deepened, carrying weight across the transmission. "They did not die for nothing. We stand here today because their sacrifice showed us the cost of hatred, the price of lies, the terrible waste of war." Aurora shifted in her arms, and Zara looked down at her daughter with a smile that needed no translation. "This is the future we choose. This is the future we build. Not through conquest or assimilation, but through cooperation, through understanding, through love that it transcends the boundaries we thought were absolute." She raised her daughter slightly, showing Aurora to the cameras to the galaxy. "This child is not human. She is not Zarathian. She is both. She is new, and she is the future we all deserve." The ceremony concluded with the school's official opening, human and Zarathian children entering together, tentative at first, but quickly warming to each other's presence. The younger ones didn't carry the baggage of war. To them, this was simply normal, as it should be. Thaddeus Brennan stood beside Zara, an old soldier who'd found unexpected purpose in his final years. He watched his daughter interact with other children, human Zarathian, and the handful of other hybrids born since Aurora's arrival, and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Pure, uncomplicated hope. "You're smiling," Zara observed. "Yeah, it suits you. Don't get used to it. I'm still a grumpy old man. A grumpy old man who saved two species from self-destruction." "We saved them," Brennan corrected. "You and me and that impossible kid playing over there. And Kira and everyone else who chose the hard right over the easy wrong." Zara's hand found their fingers intertwining in a gesture that had become natural over the months. "I've been thinking," she said carefully, "about the future, about us. Yeah, in Zarathian culture, when two people create a child together, they form a bond that transcends legal or social constructs, a recognition that their lives are permanently intertwined. We have something similar. It's called marriage. I know, I've been studying human customs." Her coloring shifted to that deep purple he'd learned meant vulnerability. "Thaddeus Brennan, would you consider making our bond official? In both our traditions, I am asking you to be my partner, my husband, the co-parent of our child, and any others we might have. Not because politics demands it, but because I want it, want you." Brennan looked at this alien queen who'd become the most important person in his life. This impossible woman who'd given him a daughter when he'd thought that dream was long dead. This partner who'd fought beside him, trusted him, built a future with him. "Zara," he said, "I'm 59 years old, set in my ways. I snore, I'm grumpy before coffee. I have nightmares from wars you don't even know about. And I'm going to age and die long before you do. You deserve better. I deserve what I choose. And I choose you, all of you, snoring and nightmares, and limited lifespan included. Then yes, Brennan said, his weathered face breaking into a genuine smile. Yes, I'll marry you in whatever ceremony or ritual makes it real for both our peoples. Because somehow impossibly you have become my home, and I don't want to lose that. Their lips met in a kiss that bridged species, that symbolized everything they'd built together. Human and Zorathian past and future, and all the impossibilities that had become real. Nearby, Aurora watched her parents with those distinctive blue eyes, vertical pupils taking in everything. At 1 year old, she understood more than either species had expected. Hybrid vigor, the scientists called it, the best of both combined. She smiled, showing small teeth that were neither quite human nor quite Zorathian, and made a sound of contentment that carried harmonics her mother would understand and words her father would recognize. Happy, her parents were happy, and so was she. The galaxy continued to turn two species, learning to coexist, to cooperate, to build something new from the ashes of old conflicts. And on Cryosis Station, where the impossible had first been achieved, a family celebrated. A human father, a Zorathian mother, a hybrid daughter. Proof that the future was not written in the stars or determined by the past. Proof that the future was what they chose to make it, together.